The name of this panel is Needs and Challenges of the Artist Community, which is great. I think that's the backbone or the spine of what we're talking about. I'm going to actually paraphrase something that Shane has written in one of his essays. All decisions related to music affect artists the most. If they aren't happy and supported, you won't see a return on investment. This is an amazing panel. From your right, we have singer-songwriter Jenny DeVoe. Then visiting us from Chicago and Gary is Lauren Pacheco. She's overseeing a new project in Gary titled Destination Gary Art Park. In the middle, the red seat, is Katie Carlson. Katie is a creative director for a band you know as Walk the Moon. On the radio right now, you can hear their songs, 1 Foot and Kamikaze. And we like that band because who doesn't like to be played on multiple formats? That's a good thing. Next is Owen Thomas. Sorry, I didn't mean to leave you hanging. Owen has so many credits that it's hard to find where to start. He works with the band Perry in a creative role, similar to what Katie does with Walk the Moon. Owen has a creative company in Fountain Square called Absorb. He served as creative director for the 2017 Fountain Square Music Festival. So again, welcome, Owen. And finally, last but not least, Sean Oreo Jones, who's an artist and founder of the Trees Hip Hop Festival. And I like standing here. That's the lectern. Can everybody hear me? Okay. Sean, tell us about Trees in terms of just starting something from scratch and whether there were hurdles or easy things in terms of establishing that festival in relation to the city of Indianapolis.
Yeah, so Trees was kind of like a brainchild that was incepted in 2015. First and foremost, I'm a musician, an artist here in the city. I've been playing pretty much all around town. So I approached something with that mindset, and I feel like I had a good relationship with a lot of the venues in town, and I have a lot of friends that it couldn't have happened without them. But the point is, I started this thing, you know, Indianapolis has roughly like 500,000 people around in the city, and 80% of them, I found out real quick, are rappers. And there's a big demand for it at the time, and it's growing as a genre. So I thought, well, you know, this walking distance between this beautiful neighborhood to all the venues that are around it, and I thought I would just drive myself insane and start something new and unique involving the hip-hop culture in the city. Yeah.
Logistically, how easy was it to make it happen?
Yeah, it's not easy. It was not easy. And I'm not a community organizer. Well, at the time I wasn't. So approaching things and talking to the city, and you know, in Indianapolis, there's always that negative connotation with hip hop being, you know, some kind of savage art form where people are shooting everyone and graffitiing on the walls and all that. So it was cool and unique to find something that involves the community, you know, coming together. And you found out real quick how everyone kind of helps each other and looks out for everyone. It was a beautiful thing. It is a beautiful thing, yes.
Thank you.
Did that answer your question?
That's
I'm really jazzed on coffee right now, Dave.
Thank you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to address one question to everyone, and then we'll kind of mix it up from there. And panelists, if you want to jump in during someone else's answer, that's cool too. Lauren.
Yes.
Gary is a city in Indiana, but maybe not the place that we would think of an art park being created downtown Gary. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I'm a native Chicagoan, born and raised on the south side by Sox Park. Not Hyde Park, Sox Park. And about 2 years ago, I moved to Gary, Indiana. One, because you know, it's really hard to, as an arts administrator and curator of public programming, it's really hard to work in a big city like Chicago because there's so much bureaucracy and red tape. And as a creative, I found not only it to be really affordable to move to Gary, Indiana. I have 2 acres of land, and I'm 2 blocks from the lake, which is pretty amazing. You can't buy that in the city. And it was really this opportunity to sort of explore my creative practice in Gary. So, you know, I ran an alternative art space in Chicago for 12 years, and it really became an extension of the downtown Chicago in terms of visual arts, music, as well as performative arts. And Chicago suffers from what most big cities probably do suffer from, is that much of their programming and investment is really centered in the central downtown district. And so my gallery spaces were always in urban communities of color, communities of poverty, and it provided that alternative space for, you know, multidisciplinary arts practices. So the city of Gary, as everyone knows, is the birth home of the Jackson 5 family.
Freddie Gibbs.
Yeah, some really amazing bluesmen and sort of independent, black-owned record label producers from Gary as well. And it really suffers from primarily a perception issue, right? Tons of vacant land, and people just drive right through the city of Gary, right? And so it's just really kind of ironic that it's the home of the Jackson 5, and it's really sort of absent, devoid of any types of significant arts and cultural planning, really from the city level. And so we all are working in very different silos, and what it lacks is that strategy. So I approached the city of Gary. I won a seed grant of $25K to look at activating 2 acres of the unbuilt environment, which was once built, into a walkable art park, which would allow for public space through the visual arts, through performative arts, a draw for people to get off of the highway, to venture into downtown Gary on their feet, with their bicycles, to not be afraid of getting out of their vehicles, and start to explore parts and parcels within the city of Gary. And then we'll extend it into the larger sort of downtown Gary. So it's really exciting. I have not broke any ground yet, but we'll start to do build out in the next couple of weeks. And we have about 100 artists who'll be producing work.
Could you talk about the experience of finding allies in civic leaders in that community?
Yeah, so I'm trained in the Alinskian methodology of community organizing, and so that's my background, is base building, looking at power dynamics, people, power, money, looking at building constituencies. And so Chicago, because I have 15 years of my practice there, I've interacted with city government, I've developed relationships with the churches and diverse communities. And so it's a really sort of fractured system in Gary, unfortunately. But what's very strong there is the church community and the church constituency, where much of the performative work exists. You've got a population that is now like maybe 76,000, right? Gary is quite large, actually. And so it's really employing some of that old school community-based organizing, grassroots, on the ground, talking to people, looking at asset management. It's really rigorous and exhausting work, right? Because you have to sort of look beyond the traditional and the existing infrastructure. But then there's real opportunity to build new constituencies and new sectors of interest within the arts, within looking at some of our cultural economies. What can Gary sort of build upon? What are the opportunities? So I mean, it's and having that sort of organizing experience from Chicago, having working with Black and Brown communities, which has been sort of incredibly helpful to my work.
Nice, thank you. All right, Katie works with, as I mentioned, Walk the Moon, one of 2 bands from Ohio, which in recent years has solved the whole formula, mainstream, huge successes. When I think of 21 Pilots, that's a band that came out of Columbus, Ohio, and built that concentric circles. Every week we're gonna go out, play a city that's kind of close, build an audience, and it's happened for them. It's like a hydrogen bomb explosion. I wanted to ask Katie about Cincinnati's role in Walk the Moon. How did they do it?
So I'm actually from Columbus originally, so I had the pleasure of experiencing the Columbus music scene, which I think influenced how I helped Walk the Moon use the Cincinnati music scene. But Cincinnati is a really special place. There are tons of artists that are local, and they can make a career out of being an artist there. There are tons of venues, and they're all over town in all sorts of different neighborhoods, so you could kind of do your own tour of the city. And you could play in Cincinnati, 5 weeks in a row and play at a different bar every night and have a great turnout. And the artists there really supported each other like they wanted to be supported. And they showed up and they paid for people's merch and they paid for their friends' music and they helped spread the word for their shows. There was definitely a DIY culture because there was this big DIY venue down there in this old factory called the MOKB, which is actually where a lot of the Walk the Moon story was birthed out of. That's where we had like their independent album release party. It's where we shot part of Anna's Son. And it was all ages. So, you have a band like Walk the Moon who's obviously more young leaning. You have a lot of, young pop, indie rock stuff, and the kids from the suburbs came out for them. And that was because there was an opportunity to do so. And I think the suburb culture was more ingrained in downtown Cincinnati and what was going on. People were aware. There was a big company called 3D something, I actually can't remember. But basically, OTR, which is the Over the Rhine neighborhood, has gone through a huge resurgence in the past couple of years. And when Walk the Moon was starting out, that was a really rundown neighborhood. And there was, now artists and stores and like the Cincinnati scene is not just music. It's really art-centric. It's also like there's tons of independent boutiques and, artists having little gallery spaces. And, all of that creates the scene in which the music can be written about, So there was like a thing happening and...
mythology.
That's right. And so there was a lot of support there without even leaving the city. Now what ended up happening too is because I think Cincinnati is connected so closely to Louisville, Indy, and Columbus, you had people who had friends or family in these cities who would tell them about Walk the Moon, and then we were able to book shows accordingly. So it's a special place, and it still is a really powerful artistic scene there. But I think it was about a lot of people participating in a DIY manner and having lots of venues and lots of different promoters to create a plethora of opportunities.
You attended Butler University, correct?
I did.
So what is Indianapolis missing when we talk about cities like Columbus, Cincinnati, and Louisville?
It's a great question. I find in Indianapolis that there seems to be these really strong neighborhoods, and these little pockets, but they're not super connected from my point of view, and people don't know what's going on in other places. I think that seems to be an issue. And you could say that could be due to public transportation of connecting all these neighborhoods because we are like a sprawling kind of city that Indianapolis kind of started swallowing up all of these surrounding areas. So they were once on their own, they're kind of rooted in the mindset of being independent of maybe downtown. So it's like, how do we connect all of these places and each, kind of leader in arts in each area, how do they come together and really support each other?
Nice. Well, I certainly have enjoyed the evangelism of Shane talking about that assessment, audit, just telling people what we have here. And I think that might help on that topic. Jenny DeVoe, a beater of odds.
Here.
All the way along, didn't need anything but herself, and she's accomplished things like. Did you make how many records with John Parrish?
3 with John.
3 albums in England with John Parrish. If you don't know John, he's a longtime collaborator with PJ Harvey, so that's all the credentials you need there. But Jenny, just could you give us a thumbnail version of your journey, and if there were times when civic leaders or the community hopped on board, helped you, or put a hurdle in your way, anything like that?
I have to say, yes, I can tell you from the very beginning, I didn't plan on doing it by myself, but I think I'm kind of grateful for how naive I was to all of the mountains in the music business. Probably for women the same, not quite the same for men as for women, but I never even noticed that. It was just, I wanted to make music. I just kind of called people and just asked. I know I called Dave and said, hey, write about me. I'm an okay artist. I made 2 records in a Bloomington basement down with Rich Morpurgo. He's a phenomenal engineer, still doing music. I might work with him again. But we didn't know what we were doing. I had a certain style. I didn't even know what it was. But he was such a good engineer that the 2 records that I made with him, I ended up getting placements with 5 shows through Sony Columbia TriStar. And again, there was no master plan, but there was a definite drive in me to be part of the music scene, no matter where it was. So I would take my band and lose money playing at like the Bitter End in New York or the Living Room in New York. I would call, you know, television shows, supervisors, and that's how I got placements. And they're like, how did you get my number? I'm like, I have no idea. I actually called a Sony record store once, and they're like, you called a Sony record store? And I was like, well, do you know how to get it? And they gave me somebody's number, and I called John McCullough at home, and John was a placer of music on Dawson's Creek, Joan of Arcadia, Party of Five, all those things way back then. And he kind of laughed at me, and he said, send me your stuff. So then I started getting like a little bit of, you know, money for some things. So yeah, I just kept making records. I think at the time I started making records, the music business, label business was imploding. They were letting people go. Labels were closing at a rapid rate. You know, Atlantic let go of Patty Griffin, which still to this day freaks me out. But, you know, it just made me think, I remember just thinking, keep your blinders on and just go forward. And I would call places, you know, I would bug what's Live Nation now, you know, I would try to do side stages through Sunshine Promotions out at Deer Creek, and I would end up doing them for people. And little by little, I guess I began a grassroots sort of thing that continues to this day. It's not that I don't want to, it's not that it wouldn't be wonderful for a label to say to me, hey, we're going to sign you, we're going to tour you with, you know, High Road or whomever. It just didn't happen for me like that. I did get knocks on my door from Atlantic and Universal, and not long ago, before Al Bonetta died, I got a call from Oh Boy Records, which was John Prine's label, but it was the girl who was working there, her name was Bree, who liked my stuff, and one of my buddies is a sideman for John Prine, and I thought, this is it. This is what I've waited for. John Prine's label. Who would not want this? But it's not what Al wanted for their label. They have a, I don't even know who all, I think Jason Wilbur does some stuff with Oh Boy. But they let, I hope it wasn't my fault, but they ended up letting Bree go not long after that. But you know, I've gotten neat calls. I've gotten flattering calls, but it does seem at the end of the day, the way that things have happened for me have been, I call people and I just throw myself everywhere to try to do things and, you know, get things to happen. And I've been lucky, but it's not because I sit and wait for things. Things happen because I like knocking on doors. I really ultimately always hope that whoever I work with ends up being my friend. Since I'm an artist first, I'm an emotional connector, so that is the most important thing to me. So I go on, you know, vibes that I get with people, and you know, I want to work with people who have my best interest in mind, and that's how I'll probably live my life and die.
If a civic leader or a philanthropist or a tastemaker or someone who wanted to invest in Indianapolis musicians could make your life easier, how could that be manifested?
You know, one thing I learned reading about network management in Canada was how much Canada invests in their artists. They give grants all the time. They help out. I've not had that kind of thing happen. I mean, I've worked with some really cool big people here connected to things, but it does seem there is a bit missing that I notice after doing this so long, a value that people living here should also say, hey, the best talent isn't always from another town. And also, when you do get an artist, don't say, we're not going to pay you, you can do this great gig, you know, for CD money or whatever. The placement of your value on your artists gives them self-esteem, allows them to quit their day jobs. And if you don't do that where you live, you will not see that flourish. You won't see the self-esteem of an artist who has time to go be a full-time artist. My other half of my living is voiceovers. I have to do, which I love, and I'm lucky, but it's all been luck, you know, and being scrappy and just saying, I want to be a full-time musician, but I do, you know, a lot of that. But to see people shop local and not go to LA for your talent, for your commercials, advertising agencies, commercials, you know, it's here. You just have to know that it's here. And, you know, everybody's from someplace. So when I go play someplace else, they think I'm a bigger deal, of course, than, you know, never a prophet in your own hometown. That's a real thing. But yeah, just seeing that would be really cool, having people just make a bigger deal out of the people that live in your own backyard, and just and love them. You know, just say you're awesome, and we're not going to try to get you it for as cheap as we can, but we're going to give you a cut of the ticket price. And that's one thing I've gotten really good at, is spacing out my gigs here, going to out of town, out of state gigs, realizing there's a negotiating factor that you do have to value yourself, and also you have to have a venue. Think that you're going to draw people to them. So you are part of that. I mean, as an artist, you have to be responsible for, you know, not booking 10 places in the same 2 weeks, so that you divide your audience up in 10 different venues. So there's a lot that goes into your responsibility. But yeah, it would be really great to have people, you know, have some of the big corporations go, you know, here's $10,000, go do a cool project, make something at the Hi-Fi happen, like a you know, a great music night of 5 artists, not just one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Owen, I didn't mention your role as a musician. Had a great band called the Elms, put out a solo record or 2 since then. So your perspective, you can look at it from everywhere. What do you see when you look at Indianapolis music?
I mean, first off, 20 years, anniversary this week, Dave Lindquist, music reporter at the Indianapolis Star. So how about a big round of applause? Prophet, disciple for all things Indianapolis music, and on a number of occasions has supported my life and the lives of the bands that I work with, and that is really, really, really special, and we're really grateful, Dave. Well, I mean, I travel a lot by virtue of my job. I love Indianapolis. I think there are a lot of incredible, wonderful, talented, groundbreaking thinkers here. I'm not sure that we know who all those people are, like in this room collective, but that's a different conversation about how we unite those people who think alike and who are artists of similar stripe, who care about excellence and authenticity and things like that. It's really funny because I guess when I think about what do I see, it's almost like more what I feel. And what I feel is here there's something genuine. And I think that's in the DNA of I don't know, maybe the Midwest, maybe something about this city specifically, but it's a really different feeling, say, working in LA for a minute or something like that, and coming back and feeling like the hustle is really, really strong there. But here you come back and you feel like the integrity is a little bit more intact. I really like that. When I was in a band, I made an effort to preserve that in my band. So people would always say, when are you moving to Nashville? When are you moving to New York? When are you moving to... I was like, I'm not. Because I don't want, by osmosis, to absorb this whole kind of thing where I don't want to think like LA, I want to think rogue. You know what I mean? That's a virtue to me. So that's what I love about, a lot of the artists here is I think that they're just trying to do their level best to get heard, make good songs, make good beats, doing the thing, and play good shows. But also trying to, I think they're a little bit more free from the encumbrance of maybe the hustle in a way that could be corrosive to artistic integrity.
When you work with emerging young musicians through Absorb, what are some of the, is there a checklist of things that we need to do to take advantage of what's available to us here in Indianapolis?
Yeah, I mean, I have a little creative house, and we work with major label acts and developing acts. And so when it comes to the younger acts, we simply help them focus on their identity and know that that's the cultural currency of everything right now. So like when I was in a band, you would go to clubs and you would play and there were full rooms and you could get your name out there, and now it's a little more of a destination event for people as opposed to just going out to the club on the weekend. But that whole conversation, that whole experience still exists. It just doesn't happen in actual rooms. It happens in virtual rooms, right? So my whole thing is to make sure that these bands know exactly who they are, exactly what success looks like to them, and then help them get there and create work that is excellent and authentic to them. And so that's a really important part of that. And then honestly, on a tactical level, when I was in a band, I was just looking for breaks. Just looking for, okay, we can play shows, but we really want to try to play a good show. So we work on a thing like the Fountain Square Music Festival and literally commit 50% of the programming to local artists. And literally the impetus for that concept this past year was we just want to give bands a leg up, just to put a show on that will draw people to see bands like Phantogram and Briggs and Dr. Dog and all this stuff, so that our friends' bands can all open for them.
Nice, yeah. That's interesting what you were saying about virtual presentation. And I guess an upside of that would be, if I'm an artist, I control my platform. I can present to the max what I want people to see. And I guess there's kind of a real world corollary to what maybe Music Cities can be and what Indianapolis presents to the world. Jenny, you mentioned just people putting money into projects, and I did want to acknowledge something that is happening in Indianapolis. Craig, are you here? What's the name of your project?
Fourth Sunday.
Fourth Sunday Music. What does Fourth Sunday Music do?
We identify local artists in central Indiana that either haven't recorded before.
Thanks.
Sorry. We identify artists in central Indiana that haven't recorded before or deserve to record better than they've recorded before, and we give a scholarship that they don't pay back, they don't owe us anything. 10-hour session at Postal Recording, the fourth Sunday of every month, unless that's a holiday, then it's the third Sunday. And we're just trying to give people a leg up.
Cool, thank you.
Postal's a great studio. It reminds me of the space that I did my records in with John. It's got analog and it's got all kinds of instruments. It's got a great vibe. So that's awesome.
Nice. Of course, we've talked about Treese being a great festival, and Walk the Moon makes me think of Bunbury and the great thing they've done in Cincinnati. And I think that type of festival is kind of, the white whale of Indianapolis. Do we need one of those? Will we have one of those? What happens here in Fountain Square, though, is a different vibe, and it's really cool, and we saw it with the Fountain Square Music Festival. I also want to mention, if you're in town for the next few days, there's another free festival called the Virginia Avenue Music Festival that happens all the way along here, 140 acts or so. But to the panel, I would just like to throw out just kind of the festival question. Pros, cons,
I actually, I called our booking agents at Paradigm before this just to get a sense from them of like, what is their perception of Indianapolis and why do they book here? Why did they not book here? What, you know, what are the issues that they face? And they actually both mentioned that they were super excited about the Fountain Square Music Festival because one of their obstacles is often that they can book a band, you know, here or at the Egyptian Room, but bringing them back is difficult. Oftentimes they like to go to markets where they can book the room and then bring them back for a protected ticket date with a festival or something that's more of a specialty event. So just to create, you know, because then they're not going back to the same room every single time, it creates a little bit of variety. You know, and I think there is a line too, though, with festivals, because we're seeing a lot of festivals, they're not quite hitting the mark anymore, and there's a divide of like the festivals that are out for marketing, you know, and then the festivals that are out for actually the music culture. And then there's the festivals, I think, that are a little lost in the middle. And I think that, you know, making sure, kind of to your point about creative, it's really important to know who you are, know what you offer, know what the intention of the festival is, and being really clear with that in every artist choice, every creative decision, every location, and making sure that you're really serving a purpose as opposed to just trying to get a festival together. And I think the Fountain Square Music Festival, I was very impressed with it this year. But it was interesting that both of those agents were like, we want more of that. And they felt that it was successful from their perception. So I think it is important, but I think it's not to lose, like, again, the integrity of what an Indianapolis festival can be versus like a Bunbury, for example.
If I could jump in. So in 2012, Chicago went through a cultural planning process. I served as a consultant for creative economies, cultural hub development, and that was a really important moment for the city, a really important cultural moment for the city, because primarily, I believe, as evidenced in the work that's happening in some of Chicago's communities, was the public imagination was just incredibly open, hungry, eager, and just wanted to really see some of the deliverables and action steps that we had outlined in this very broad and ambitious plan sort of reach communities. So I produce a festival in Chicago in a community called Bohlsen, which is primarily Mexican, Mexican-American. It's dealing with a lot of issues of gentrification and displacement. The festival is called the Chicago Lowrider Festival. So if you're familiar with those cars that jump on hydraulics, primarily from LA and Texas, there's a pretty significant constituency here in the Midwest, right? So along with that car culture and the muralism, aesthetics involved, is all of these sort of subculture music opportunities, right? And so we have really cultivated the DJ culture in Chicago. So providing, you know, really significant stakes in terms of stages in our festival for different DJ collectives, as well as supporting the rockabilly community in Chicago, the Mexican rockabilly community, and then sort of the suburban Illinois, broader Illinois community, which has been really special because last year we had 7,000 people attend our event. We took a year off because we're just like, do we want to do this anymore? You know, what are we working towards, right? What is the identity? What is the festival really doing for the community? Can we really see impacts? And then fundraising. And you know, we with that year off, we popped up with 6,000-7,000 people because folks really came out to not only see the cars and to interact with different types of folks, but to really see these sort of underground subculture folks who are playing in these sort of mysterious places that folks are just unfamiliar with. So I really see the role of festivals, specifically in Chicago, helping to bridge folks, tourists coming into the city and being brave enough to step into, south side, west side of the city, but also thinking about the role of festivals for the city of Gary, right? And what might a city look like if driven by culture? Because we have so much vacant land, we have so many, dead streets. I mean, there's real sort of opportunity, and it's really quite special.
Please.
The one thing I was going to say also is innate to the identity of Indianapolis. There are a lot of really, really unique and cool things. And I think that when we think about a thing like the Fountain Square Music Festival, to me it's like a little bit of a metaphor, because there are giant festivals everywhere. I'm not sure that there isn't a little bit of festival fatigue out there. It's like, there's just all these giant. Yeah, well, yeah, you know, stuff like that. And it's like, I just think that for us as a city to almost know our identity and to go, there's a cozy warmth to this whole thing, and anything we can do to double down on our city's identity, and ask that question about what value does Indianapolis have? I can tell you what that is for me as a guy who works around the world, to come back here and shit is real here. That's how it feels to me, you know, and it's warmer. And right, so I like that, and so that was the process of the DNA behind a festival like Fountain Square Music Festival, is embrace our neighborhoods, embrace these, you know, these things like that, and put events in the streets like that, which I think is what Treese does, and I think it's like, you know, really, really double down on that stuff and not feel like we've got some kind of mental thing. It's like, well, we got to compete with Coachella. We don't. We just have to put on cool stuff, you know.
I first and foremost, like I mentioned before, I never thought about making a festival, and I approached that as an artist. I think I had a good idea with Treese, just because I played with almost everyone on the bill. So, and making that essential for the city, people that don't necessarily have any idea about how potent our hip hop community is, and showing that there is a place for it in Indianapolis, and doing it in a way that is almost just, you know, putting your mark on it, curating it through the vision of an artist, first and foremost. We didn't really think about marketing. We didn't think about, you know, just like kind of professional ways or business ways of doing it. I approached it as a way to make really, really good artists come through and showcase what they do. That's the foundation of it. And I feel like that helps festivals in the long run, with the longevity of it, have a good foundation here with good venues, good local acts that people are like, whoa, they can do this anywhere in the country, which I wholeheartedly agree. Then when, you know, you have like your big booking companies come through, the people that have no idea that Indianapolis has this kind of platform or to offer, they know that this isn't our first rodeo. And I think it's important, if you start a festival, you know, don't get too big for your britches. Essentially, just really focus on what you know, what you believe in. Get people on board that you know that are eager and hungry to do that.
Excellent. Yeah, so I think we can appreciate the concept of doing a festival for a reason rather than just, hey, let's try to make a lot of money with the festival. I think this has been awesome, guys. Thank you. I think I'll close with a thought that Josh brought up to me in a phone conversation. This is primarily directed to Jenny and Sean. What if civic leaders or tastemakers, these people that hopefully are in this room and that we've been talking about, could help an Indianapolis act be an ambassador on the road? Is that a crazy idea? What might that look like?
I think that's the huge challenge, because for somebody who's done this around here for a long time, the biggest challenge for me is to want to connect to other cities. Wherever I've been, New York, Georgia, Chicago, Illinois. I mean, we've played the Duluth Blues Fest for the last 3 years. It's a 12-hour drive. We can't fly. It costs a lot of money. I mean, I lose money by the time I get back, but it's worth doing. So I think, yeah, it's almost like if there was something, that's a great idea, Dave, if there were, let's say, tour support, if there was funding for something like that, and a way to connect to other cities. Because I think one of the coolest feelings is when you really make it in your own city and you have a name, but then there's this thing where you have this floundering thing. You have to leave. You have to go out and do it elsewhere. And it feels so great to do that. And then you come back and your audience has grown because they see that you've left. And then you also have brought with you a new awareness. But yeah, to have something that was just a financial tour support or just an understanding of what it takes to go do something like that is, I think, a big deal. Yeah.
Sean?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, like, knowledge is the best way to help people. I feel like organizations like Musical Family Tree here in Indianapolis, providing workshops to show artists and musicians how to do that, how to book your own tour, how to make yourself financially stable when you're trying to, make this a lifestyle last long. But yeah, to have civic leaders and people here in the city, offer support for programs and initiatives that can kind of help the musician, I think could go a long, long way. I know for a fact could go a long way. Have designated nights that, we can gather as a group and kind of, piggyback off each other's ideas. Money always helps, but I feel like learning and gathering information from each other can go a longer way. Yeah.
Excellent.
I have something to add to that, actually.
Thank you.
So Walk the Moon always, whenever they have a show, they always introduce themselves and say, "We are Walk the Moon. We are from Cincinnati, Ohio." And to the point where, we sell merchandise with Ohio on it, and people from all over the country purchase it. We sell merchandise with Cincinnati on it, and people purchase it. And I think that came out of a sense of pride. They took a serious. It was an honor for them to be from Cincinnati, and they felt like they were ambassadors. And I think to create that kind of culture, first, everyone who is from Cincinnati is obsessed with being from Cincinnati. And that came out of, a lot of the kids that graduated from college or didn't go to school and went to art school or wanted to start their own thing, they stayed in Cincinnati. So there was no brain drain. And they retained all this young talent and all these young people who were doing various different kinds of art forms. And the city really focused on making sure that was a priority. So then there was the culture, there were people, they built a pride around being from Cincinnati. And then when bands would break out, they were excited to tell people that they were from Cincinnati. Everyone knows they're from Cincinnati. It's like a common Walk the Moon fact. It's on their social media. They talk about being from Cincinnati, talk about being from Ohio, what that means to them, and they're always asked this in interviews as a result. So they're always talking about Ohio. So I think it's also part of that, in addition to funding and helping them get on the road, it's like creating a pride for people wanting to say, hey, I'm from Indianapolis. This is what Indianapolis is all about.
Excellent. Thank you to Jenny, Lauren, Katie, Owen, and Sean for setting the tone, and enjoy the rest of your day. Big hand for them.